Caddis Maximus here, this time with a review and comparison of the Titan Impact bit sets versus the GM PowerTorque Diamond Coated Impact bit sets. I didn't actually have the Titans when I did the Milwaukee versus DeWalt in the previous video. I just picked these up. It was like $45 or something for these 4 sets at O'Reilly's. These PowerTorques are also sold at O'Reilly's. I'll still be comparing these against the Milwaukee and DeWalt bits, but I spent so much time in that review and it would be too redundant to re-break out those sets and then relabel another video of just Titan versus Milwaukee versus DeWalt. Moving on, Titan tools have seemed to be pretty decent. They've actually been a brand that's been around for at least 20 years, and I think they've been sold out. I'm not exactly sure, but the management and whoever runs them has been kind of determined to have them be kind of different. They at least try to put a little effort into somehow making their tools stand out a little bit and gain a slight edge in the market. And I've reviewed various Titan tools in the past, and they've all been unique, nice little tools for what they were. And they've always been kind of niche. They always were different. They weren't just like simply a copy of somebody else. And not to criticize too much on these PowerTorques, but these are just, you know, straight hex shank bits that have a diamond coating. Let's go ahead and take a look at the packaging real fast here, and I'll include all these part numbers down in the description. Reduces cam out and slippage, more effective grip and torque, and then down here it's diamond coating, protects from damage. Lifetime guarantee, they say they're ANSI rated. If the product is defective in the materials or workmanship, they'll replace it. Protects from damage. So, you know, unfortunately that whole warranty statement's a little confusing when it's if it's literally diamond coating. Let's go ahead and open these up. And it protects it from damage, but it's a driver bit. Technically it's consumable. It's only going to drive so many bits. And it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have that kind of warranty, but maybe they will. Maybe if you blow these bits out, they will replace them. Let's go ahead and take a close look at these. We can see, let's zoom in even. There we go. We can figure out the zoom here. There we go. Yeah, you can see there's a little crystalline coating. I guess it's just a very, very thin diamond coating, and then they have a carbon finish. They have their little they're laser etched with a little diamond on them, so you know that they're special bits. But that's all it is. So what I can see is that the diamonds are hard. And at least initially, that texturing, that hard texturing, is going to give you some nice grip in the fasteners. I can also mention that I like the way the tips are designed. They're actually cut and they have pretty thick profile. And we'll go ahead and compare that to a Milwaukee and a DeWalt here. You can see the Milwaukees, and the reason I have, and people have already commented, is that when they force these tips on the Milwaukees here, it leaves the webbing both slightly rounded and a little bit too thin. And really, it turns out with Phillips, you really want a nice square edge. That's where you get some real good traction. So I could see the diamond coating helping some. And I haven't tried these out yet, as you can see. But I'm pretty sure you'll blow out that coating in no time. That's the realistic nature of driving quite a few fasteners with high power impact drivers. But I thought these were kind of neat. And GM PowerTorque's at least trying something different, and it certainly is catchy saying that you have bits that are diamond. Now, they only had 3 sets of these bits. I did buy these in store, and the 3 sets they had were number 2 Phillips. They had these 1/4-inch slot heads, and I know I shouldn't be cutting generally in my direction, but that is a box cutter, and it's a fairly controlled situation. I'm just making excuses. So here's the diamond coating. We can see it didn't quite get on all the way there. Super thin. On a slot head, actually, I could see this being a little bit more advantageous because it'll prevent it from wanting to slide back and forth. And then the last set was this T25, which I suppose is the most common star drive, especially for like deck screws. But I just thought I was curious that that's the only 3 sets they had. And I can understand the Phillips and slot head, and they probably should just had 2-piece sets where instead, one thing I've noticed already is they're magnetized. Are they all? No, those aren't. But for some reason, these two bits are highly magnetized, although all of them are not, which is kind of interesting. But they should have included just a slot head and a Phillips if it's just going to be little two-piece sets. And then here's, of course, the star bits. You can see the coatings. It looks like they just dipped them in something and then some kind of sintering compound. Anyway, moving on to some of these Titan bits here. So these were a pretty reasonable price. I think it was only like $3 or $4 or something for this 5-piece set. And these would be competing with the DeWalt's or anybody else, or the Milwaukee's. Here we are. I think they have an interesting design. I kind of like that they do have their own neck design. You can actually tell these apart from other brands. And I like the way they polish those two little rings. That's supposed to be their torsion area, as well as having a neck down. Kind of like how the DeWalt's do, where this is DeWalt's PowerTorque, although the neck is thicker on the Titans. And to tell you the truth, I kind of like that. What I also find interesting is the Phillips head end is actually extremely compact. This is actually one of the most compact I've ever seen. They just have just enough top end there to catch any number 2 Phillips, and that's it. And if we look and compare against the DeWalt here, they have a nice straight cut as well. So I can tell that these are already going to work a little better than these Milwaukee's because, come on, they have a thicker webbing. So it really just depends on the grade of material, how long they last. That's one of the things about these DeWalt's is they don't last forever, nor do the Milwaukee's, but they really do, you know, they last a fair amount. They drive a fair amount of fasteners. Phillips is always slipping, and they seem to take a lot of abuse. And so I would say that these are pretty decent. I'll have to provide an update video, and eventually I'll do a big test video, but that's a little out of my realm here to find the right fasteners and then attempt to drive a bunch of them and figure out which bit empirically seems to be lasting longer or doesn't want to slip out of the fastener. That would be a huge old long video that a much larger tool review channel would probably be able to endeavor to take. Let's go and take a look at these long ones. That was 6 inches would be the standard for a long size or a long stem Phillips. If you ever need sizes that are actually longer than 6 inches, it's going to be a special effort. You're really going to have to use extensions, although I've seen online upwards of 12-inch long single piece bits. And here these are. They're exactly the same as the shorter 2-inch ones. These have a pretty nice stem, although what's interesting about these 6-inch ones we can already see is that they have the torque section or the turn down sections the whole length of the bit. I could actually foresee these not delivering quite as much power because that's a big old long torsion spring when you're twisting it. And you probably would feel that, to tell you the truth, especially if you happen to be using this in a drill driver, that you would really feel that springing action. Let's go and compare that. We have a few different brands from Apex. We have the Titan. Let's go and take a look at this Milwaukee. You can get some unboxing in this video. How about that? There's a Milwaukee, and then we have one of these Easy Power contractor grade ISOMAX American made bits. And we can put them all together here. And let me actually get a DeWalt. Here we go. This DeWalt's not a 6-inch, but it'll do good enough. So the various brands, like the Easy Power, they turn it down just a little bit where it's round, and I like that. When you use these longer Phillips bits, a lot of times for me it's service when I'm taking apart stuff, whether there's electronics or tools, and a lot of issues is the holes that screws are recessed in don't accept the 1/4-inch hex. You really need a round shank. And so that's what's nice about these Easy Power ISOMAX bits. And you always know that it's a nice Easy Power because they have ISOMAX, AAA. And that's another aspect that did attract me about the Titan is that it's very thin. This is a very high access Phillips. And as a matter of fact, I've had certain situations, for some reason they managed to put like number 2 Phillips in holes that you can't even fit a normal thickness bit like this or like the Apex down into. What's nice is you can fit one of these Titans or these impact bits. Here's the Milwaukee. We can see that the Milwaukee, the webbing is just really thin on these Milwaukees, and it's the same way on the newer ones, where you really want a nice square webbing. for the Phillips bits to really grab nicely. And that's always kind of confused me. And then there's the DeWalt down there. As you can see, the DeWalt with and the Milwaukee, their flex torque section is kind of equivalent. It's down at the end of the bit, and they have a nice strong shank. So I do still have a bit of a concern about the torsion, but for the high axis, where these will fit anywhere where the head of a Phillips head screw can go, is pretty nice. And to tell you the truth, anybody who's watching this who does a lot of electronic repair and taking things apart will probably like these for that, because these will just fit down any of those tight holes that for some reason there's a number 2 Phillips, but it has a I seem to run into it all the time, where even bits like this just will not fit. So enough talk about that. Let's go and move on to the 33 piece. That's just because it has an extension. It's 32 bits. And a little bit of computer nerdism, that we have a 32-bit set here. No 16-bit. We're actually moving up in the world. I'm sorry my voice gets so weird. I gotta find a new camera setup. I'll get you a new camera someday. Okay, so here is their 32-bit set. I think this was like $15. You can see that they don't polish little rings, which is a little bit annoying. You know, if there's going to be tightened bits, then they should at least polish the rings. You know what I'm saying? And let's see if they just have the size. Is that actually printing right there? I can't tell. No, there's no other printing, so you have no way of knowing that these are even Titans unless you bought them new, which I kind of like about the Milwaukees and all these other brands. I guess if Titan sells enough of these, and you'll recognize them from the little rings. What's also interesting about a lot of these Titan sets is when they come with hexes, they happen to be metric, and so they have metric and I believe imperial over here. Let's take a see. Yes, they actually have both. It's a combination of metric and imperial in this set. A 6-piece set of smaller imperials, and then a wider range metric set that goes all the way up to 6mm. I think that's kind of interesting choices. A nice selection of flatheads, of course, star bits, Robertson square drives, and then your usual suspects for Phillips. I think that's a pretty worthy set. The little extensions that these things come with are always really cheesy and not very well made, and this is no exception. I'm sure this you could blow out pretty easily with a modern impact driver. It may last for a little bit of time, but I doubt that this piece right here is really as impact ready as the bits are, and so that's a little bit cheesy. But they do come with this nice holder which will protect the bits incredibly well. Most times I actually end up using the other half of these holders to hold other loose bits, and since they hold 32, they're actually quite convenient. So let's go and finish up this overly wordy review and comparison with looking at these impact adapters. And the reason I picked these up is I thought they were pretty interesting. One is you can see that they don't do any neck down. These things are just thick shank all the way up. And I've done some extension reviews and comparisons in the past with hand tools. Some of my older subscribers will know that, and you can go through my page and find those. But there's wobble extensions that are like this for use with 3/8 and 1/2 inch, etc. These are interesting because they're designed to work with 1/4 inch drive impact drivers, and they are 6 inches long. They do have laser etching, so you actually know that you have Titans. Regarding those extensions, many of these, when you put it on the socket, they wobble only. And then there's some where they will turn down the neck, so when you put on the socket, it can also be used as a locking extension. What I thought was unique about the Titans is that all the others I've seen, they actually just turn this section around so it won't wobble around when you put it in the socket. But Titans, I thought, were kind of interesting because they're just a little bit higher quality, because you can see they instead machined a matching square. And the difference is, of course, is like the Harbor Freights that I reviewed, when you're using them as a straight extension, all the force is going right into these little curves here, and they eventually flatten out, and you have a diminishing ability for it to wobble, and then they start getting really loose in the sockets and the sockets want to fall off. This provides some extra drive force because now there's a square in that shelf area. And so I've always kind of been hit or miss. Sometimes you don't like these style because when you press, they don't, they inappropriately push in when you really just want them to only wobble. But I thought for impact ones, that's actually pretty smart because you have a square drive so you can push it in impact to actually break the fastener, and then you can snap it out and then use it as a wobble extension. As we can see with the machining on these, they're actually pretty nice. They have some pretty good curves. You can see that they are fully machined through the little 5,000 feed rate lines. The ball detents are pretty good on these. I wouldn't say that they're as strong as I'd like them to be. The 1/4 inch one's actually really good. This 1/2 inch one it's a good ball detent, but I would have to say I would like it a little bit stronger, especially for an impact driver. But you can see what they've done here is they still have the squares on the 3/8 and on the 1/2 inch. So I really appreciated that. That's one of the aspects I kind of like about Titan, is how they at least try to make something different, make them a little bit unique, maybe try to improve on the design if they can. Anyway, I think that's the end of my Titan versus GM PowerTorque, although I just spent a whole bunch more time talking about the Titans. I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Catus Maximus out.